Hey, Trailblazers. In this episode, we're going to share with you how to tap into the psychological triggers that make people want to buy specifically from you with Bryan Eisenberg. So stick around. If you want to build a legitimate, profitable online business without shiny objects, without the hypey gimmicks, and without the stress and overwhelm, if you want to make more money without having to be present online all day, every day, pumping out content that nobody sees and hustling DMs to generate leads and sales, then this is the place for you. Welcome to the Digital Trailblazer Podcast, your online business university, where you'll learn how ordinary people start from ground zero with no influence, no email list or audience to sell to, and no business or marketing experience, and go from working 9-to-5 jobs to building successful 6- and 7-figure online businesses and all the steps in between. Learn the strategies that worked and what didn't. Learn the mistakes that they made and how to avoid them, and then learn their plans for scaling their businesses and taking things to the next level. All so that you can build your business faster and easier and make more money without sacrificing the things that are important to you in your life. I'm your host, Leah Ray Getz, and with me is my husband, Todd. Now, let's get to it with today's guest. Hey, Bryan, we're excited to have you with us today. Welcome to the show. Before we dive deep into the psychological triggers and everything packed around that, do a quick little intro, let people know what you're about.
Quick intro is always a challenge for me. You know, when you've been in an industry for now almost 3 decades. My story goes back to I was a former social worker. Brother decided he wanted to do business with me. And we started in the very early days of the internet. So, mid 90s. We started the first conversion rate optimization agency in 1998. We actually coined the term conversion rate optimization, the term bounce rate. I founded the Web Analytics Association, which became the Digital Analytics Association. We've written a couple of New York Times best-selling books. I've had some very successful exits with companies like Bizarre Voice and User Testing that went public that we've mentored. And so there's a lot of story there.
That's awesome. So I think, it's great to have someone on who's been in this industry, which, we feel like we've been in for a long time, but really I think it's maybe 9 years, 8-9 years. And so you're like in the way back when. Yeah. Like
dial up. Yeah.
You could put almost anything on and people would just randomly buy it. It was so cool. And I've heard all his awesome stories about back in the day.
It's funny you say that. We were just talking about it this week, right? We're seeing everybody jump into AI, right? And they're pumping out content with AI. And I'm like, I remember the days, and most people on here is not going to remember, but there was a software package called Web Position Gold. And it just created these doorway pages full of spammy text. Okay. And that's how people ranked and started. And, this is before Google, before that. This is when you were ranking on Alta Vista and Lycos. And it was a whole different world, but that spammy text worked. The thing that most people don't get, and this is, we'll have some fun with this today, is it took Google till about 2004-ish. So call it 10 years to get where it changed the paradigm of how we marketed online instead of that spammy search engine marketing, the way a lot of people were doing it back then, to, okay, now we got to create relevance. And we're seeing that in AI, but it's going to be way faster than 10 years.
Interesting. So when you say that, what does that look like? Or what do you mean by that?
So I'm watching the adoption curve. I wrote about it this week. In fact, the internet was a wave, right? It really changed everything, the way we do it, from the way we buy, we shop, we consume information, entertain ourselves. I probably somewhere back there have a DVD player, right? Like, we don't even use those anymore. Everything's streaming. The internet fundamentally changed so much. And it did it. Like I said, it took years of adoption. There were people who still early days didn't believe in the internet. It took Jeff Bezos 60 investors to say yes to him. If you were one of those 60 investors today, how would you be feeling?
Pretty bad.
Okay. But that's what happened. Now we're in a world of AI, and that acceleration is going to happen so much faster. It was way slower in the Industrial Revolution. Think about, there are guys who were in the horse and buggy business for 20, 30 years before cars finally took them out of business. In the internet, took 10 to 20. This is going to be 1 to 5.
It is almost scary how fast things are moving. I think that, to me, makes all of this, who knows where everything's going to be in the next 10 years, right? But when we're in today's marketplace and we're looking to stand out against everyone who's just pumping out stuff and they're using AI and they're doing all these things. It's people who really have an authentic, unique voice and can hit all of those psychological triggers that really attracts people to them, to their brand, to what they want to buy, which is so important. So walk us through that. How do we actually start to tap into these psychological triggers and that get people specifically wanting to buy from you?
You've said a couple of key words there. It's that authenticity that comes through. It's not the fake stuff that keeps getting pumped out of ChatGPT. There's a famous expression that says if you get enough monkeys typing at a typewriter, eventually you recreate Shakespeare. They still haven't. And the same thing's going to happen with chat, right? You're going to get a bunch of people going to pump out content, and it's a predictive engine of words. So all it's going to do is produce the most predictable content possible. It's not going to give something unique. It's not going to give you a great angle. It's not going to connect with people the way you think it is. It's just what it has done is it raised the bottom of how bad content used to be, but that's it, right? And so I think the main point is what you said is it's authenticity. It's coming in with your story. And what I found after so many years of coaching, and it's funny, right? Whether it's big companies like Google or whether it's tiny companies like, this will be a fun one. One of our earliest clients was a guy who did design for Yellow Page ads, and we kept him in business as long as he possibly could. Okay. But it's about being really authentically you. And what does that mean? And I think that's where a lot of people struggle. Let's jump right in. I'm going to give you one of these great techniques that people can use. Whenever we look at a brand, whether it's a personal brand or a corporate brand, we like to look at something called the brand diamond. Okay. And this is a concept developed by my friend David Freeman, who used to be a screenwriter for Hollywood. And whenever a screen didn't work, they'd send it to him. And he used to do this class both in LA and in New York. And he'd run you through and he'd show you all these different characters. And he'd show you why is it we fall in love with these great characters on these Disney movies, even if they don't say a word. Or we can completely relate to someone like Tony Soprano, right? Here's this mafioso guy who's supposed to be a tough guy, but yet we actually really kind of like him. And, why is that? So here's the thing. Every brand has a core identity. What is it about them, right? So for Tony Soprano, he's a mob guy. What's their purpose? And his purpose is to, run this mob business. But the part that makes him relatable and the part where we really connect, the human side of this, and this is what most people fear the most, because the core and the purpose are always out in the sunshine, but it's the quirks and idiosyncrasies and our vulnerabilities that always hide in the shadow. And if you think about that, Tony Soprano was this tough guy who suffered with panic attacks, right? And he was a deep, deep family man. And so when you start realizing that, it's like you can like Tony because he is this family man, because he's not this perfect being. And so many people, when they're online, and I saw it from day one. This is something my brother and I have been partners throughout our career now. I always became the face of the company because I was like, I'm kind of boring for the most part, right? So, I don't talk politics. I don't drink, like all that. So I get to be authentically who I am all the time. And that was a very early decision that I was very comfortable with. And I think a lot of people really fail to recognize how powerful their authentic voice is. And if they leaned in more into their quirks, what makes them a little weird, and their vulnerabilities, what makes them human. Because think about it. Every superhero that has also had quirks, idiosyncrasies, and vulnerabilities. I mean, Superman, greatest superhero of all time. What was his vulnerability? Kryptonite. Exactly. And Lois Lane, right? So those two things are part of what connect us. We all have them, but yet our human nature wants to try to hide them. And that's crazy to me.
So how do we actually display those in a tasteful way that actually attracts people and not just be a hot mess online?
Yeah, it is all about just being you. And I'll give you an example. You can go and check on social media on YouTube. My good friend, Dr. Matt Delgado, I talk about him in my upcoming book. Matt is a chiropractor. And when I first met him, and he tells a story in the book he's writing. He went and he's networking and he's trying to meet a dentist. And he walks in there and says, okay, yeah, I'm a chiropractor. And he just graduated. Matt looks like he's 19 years old. He's always got this baby face. And the guy says, so what's different about you? And he says, well, I do this technique and I do this tech, and nobody cared. So I meet with him and we're starting to chat. And I asked him, said, what makes you special? Like, why do people really like you as a doctor? And he wasn't really super clear on it. And I finally pointed him back to his reviews. And his reviews talked about how much he listened to people. Okay, so that was a clue. That gave us our first clue. Because, what the average physician cuts you off within 2 minutes. Okay, he was spending 7 minutes plus with people. So, okay, I got a clue now. Then we started digging into where did that come from? And that came from his own vulnerability, where he suffered with Graves' disease. He literally had one foot in the grave with an autoimmune disease, which normally targets women. But here he was, just out of chiropractic school, working in a clinic 75 hours a day, getting completely burnt out, and he had to heal himself. And the more he started tapping into that, now, mind you, he's now a nervous-based chiropractor, so not a traditional chiropractor. He used to do all the stuff you see on social media with the pretty girls getting popped and loud cracks and, all of that. But it wasn't really him. It brought him an audience, but it wasn't giving him the success he wanted. And so as we started getting into more of his story, as he started getting into more of his authentic background, his origin story, his Superman story, and he started putting out there with his quirk, because here he is so concerned about the nervous system, but he's addicted, like seriously addicted to the number one biggest challenge to the nervous system, which is his caffeine addiction. Even through chiropractic school, he had a multi-$1,000 coffee machine that he dragged with him. He had a box for furniture. That's it, like a little storage box, but he had like a $3,000 coffee machine back then. He's human, just like all of us, right? And I mean, I'm sure you've seen chiropractors online that talk about perfect nutrition or, all these things. And then you look at them and you're like, well, they've got the pot belly and, they seem burnt out. And he saw that at the clinic he was doing as well. And as soon as he started being able to introduce some of that coffee addiction in there, it's real. He's vulnerable about it, what it does to him when he's overscheduled. All of a sudden, he's getting more interaction, more business, because he's just being himself.
I think that's so important. I mean, it's basically your story that's making you relatable to your audience. And that's what I think people are really seeking when they're looking to do business with somebody now. I know that with all the AI stuff going on, people are concerned about, it's going to take my job, or, it's going to take over my business. I don't think it's going to get to that point where it's going to replace human beings in your businesses and in your jobs and things like that, primarily because we've already seen with all the automation that is available now and different ways that we can automate our content, whether it's a blog post or a YouTube video or a webinar or something like that. People are already sick of the automation. People are already sick of the automated bots and the chat bots and things like that. And making the chat bots more body and having more of it, I don't think is going to help. I know that we've seen with our, for example, webinars. When we did live webinars, when we first started doing live webinars, and for us, this was like in 2016, 2017, maybe, we would have live show up rates in the 30% or so. And that was considered fairly good. And I know other marketers would get as high as 40s, 50% show up rates on their live webinars. And then what happened is simulated live technology came out and people started simulating their live webinars like it was actual real, and they had simulated chat roles and all that stuff, and the fake scarcity and the fake urgency and all that stuff. And at first it worked, and it worked really well because people couldn't tell. But then people started to catch on that, this isn't an actual real live thing. And then what we saw was live attendance rate on real live webinars was started as dropping. And now when we do a live webinar, I think we're, if we get in the mid to high teens for show up rates, that's pretty good. And it's just a struggle now to convince people that think something is authentic and real and live. But when you do it that way, people crave it. And especially with sales calls and things like that, I know that when we put a personal touch to the invite or do a quick check-in after they booked a call and before the call actually happens, we'll do like a live check-in. We'll record a video and send it to them. We'll use their name. And it's not a pre-recorded thing that we just send to everybody. It's personalized to them. And because of that, we almost have zero no-shows now. Whereas I know other people in their businesses, they're dealing with 90% no-show rates. Only 10% of people are showing up. But that authenticity and that personal touch is what people are really craving. And so with what you're doing, I think it's so important for people to just be more authentic. Even you're going to leverage the AI, but you still need to be there and be present in your business and tell your story.
You can't scale humanity. All the stuff we're producing, yeah, that can all be automated. Like if you're bogged down by a gazillion emails, absolutely. Use some automation to filter them and respond to them. Fine. But like you said, being able to connect with people and have real relationship, I think COVID definitely changed people and the way we want to buy. And I think this is the hard part for people to understand. When we were so isolated, we saw within the first few weeks how much people still craved real connection. Okay. And so we jumped online because the only thing we had. But now we're starting to realize, like you said, that doesn't feel real. Right. And so where can you find those opportunities, which is friction? Right. And I always say, whenever there's friction, there's opportunity. And that opportunity, that system to how can you maximize your realness, your humanness with people? That's the part that gets you to that next level. We're actually doing a little project. I don't know if Matt might be upset with me if I reveal it here and before he does. But we were joking around the other day about how so many people are so burnt out, so overwhelmed, so overscheduled that do you remember as little kids when your mom put you in timeout? You guys have kids as well?
We do. I definitely didn't get timeouts when I was a kid.
No,
I
I
don't think
didn't.
Todd did either. But we had friends that had parents that did that.
But some of us need timeouts. We really do. Like we're so yeah, no, we're so overwhelmed. We're constantly stimulated by some screen, by something that we really need a timeout. And so we were talking about this, and he's okay. I'm going to reveal it. This is a first. He's creating prescription pads to give out to his clients as a power of moments thing to give them an excuse to have their own timeout.
I love that. Yes, we use that for our children nowadays, and I'm jealous that they get to go chill in their room for the
Oh,
next
yeah.
X amount of time.
You remember when like you were so upset when they used to send you out for a nap, and now all we want to be able to do is take a nap.
For real. That would be lovely. Now, we've talked about it a lot on this podcast. Facts tell, stories sell. And obviously, all of those psychological triggers, all of that authenticity and bringing out your quirks and your personality all wrap up and play in this arena, right? So walk us through your storytelling process. What does that really look like?
It's a big elephant. So there's no pun intended why I decided to call my book, I Think I Swallowed an Elephant, right? Telling your full story, a real story, is an overwhelming challenge. And just the same way you eat an elephant, you got to do it one bite at a time. And so the first place I always like to tell people is, okay, let's start with your beliefs, because your beliefs drive everything. It drives your North Star, it drives your direction. It drives how you're going to go places. And I'm not talking about a mission statement that you see on walls every place that, especially big corporate people do. What is so impactful about why you do what you do that even if you weren't doing it for money, you would still do it? As an example. And I ask people to go through an exercise of identifying all of their beliefs behind their business, behind their customers. Because inside those beliefs, there are going to be limiting beliefs. There are going to be some beliefs that you're going to have to transform if you want to get to the next level. And I think by starting there, you start identifying pieces of what I eventually like calling brandable chunks. The stuff that's so unique to who you are that even if someone else did it, it wouldn't sit right because it's not you. And we're not talking about unique value proposition, right? This is a unique human proposition, right? It's connecting it to that story. And I'll give you a perfect example of even why the book got written. Dr. Matt has had on his walls for years that he believes in miracles. And it was July of last year, back in my 30s when we sold our agency, we had taken it public and all that. I had ballooned up to 277 pounds. I had 3 kids. My youngest just was born. My middle one was starting to play baseball. And I just was worried that I wanted to keep up with my kids. And so I worked for the next 10 months. I worked really hard and I lost 100 pounds, actually 105 pounds. I got to 172 pounds. And I always tell people the secret to losing 100 pounds is the same way you eat an elephant, one bite at a time, 1 pound at a time, one decision at a time. Come back over the last few years, I was a big public speaker. I travel all over the world. COVID hit, no more speaking. And it was fine. I was happy for a while. Like I was glad not to have to deal with the hassle of traveling. But what ended up happening is that story that I had told myself about my kids no longer was working because they had grown up. My youngest is 16, my middle one's 20, my daughter 24 is out of the house, and the weight started creeping up. And I was just doing the bare minimum. And I realized I wasn't happy, and I knew my story wasn't working, and I struggled to find one. Well, I found the story that I needed to transform my life and my business by accident. So unfortunately, my brother in the last few years has had 3 serious health challenges. He's healthy today. He's fine. But in July of last year, I decided to go for a blood test. And when I got that blood test, my blood sugar was 3 times the normal level. Okay. My A1C was through the roof. My blood pressure was terrible. I only realized it months later, and we'll get to how, that I had blurry vision. I was fatigued. I couldn't concentrate. I just wasn't being present for myself, for my family. Like sometimes the only reason I'd get off the couch was to walk my dog. And I was still getting my 7,500 to 10,000 steps a day because I was kind of going through the motions. I was eating plant-based. I was eating minimally processed food, but my blood sugar was through the roof. Something wasn't working. And at that moment, when the nurse practitioner told me that where my blood sugar was, I said, okay, I have an option here. I said, I can take the easy way out. She offered me medication and I could go ahead and go through it. But I know any good thing doesn't come from taking an easy way out, just from automating everything. You've got to align your story with your systems and your action. And that comes into the belief. And because Matt has always said he believes in miracles, I told her, give me 3 weeks. Let me change what I'm doing. Let me see if I can fix it. In 3 weeks, I cut my sugar in half. Within 4 months, after getting a CGM, continuous glucose monitor, I got my blood sugar back into the 70s and 80s, completely normal. I healed everything. My foot had a terrible bunion on it. I'm laying in bed one day and it's completely straight. And I'm like, did a miracle just happen? And it did. And miracles happen all the time. And so I tell you that not to brag, not to do anything like that, but tell you, look, I was in a terrible place. Okay. I didn't even realize how terrible I was. I was on my way to crashing. Okay. Because I was just doing the same old, and thinking was good enough. But I had to reevaluate my story, look at my beliefs, right? Because I believed walking 7,500 steps and eating plant-based and minimally processed food was good enough for my health. It wasn't. Those beliefs, the key piece to everything you do, okay? And I mean, I look at what you guys are doing and I could see the beliefs everywhere. And that's what I love about what you guys are doing with this podcast, because who you're bringing on as guests, how you're living your lives, what you've been able to accomplish, all comes from the beliefs you have, which have encouraged the actions you take, which have put in all the automations, which have put in all the systems, the little tidbits, the videos to help people get the best out of their experience with you. And that's the way everybody's got to look at a business, right? Start with that story. Why did you guys want to start this digital trailblazer? Why were you doing your online business? How are you building this all out? And then watching that, say, okay, well, great. How do I find the time to build the systems to reduce the friction, not only for me, but for my guests, for our audience, for all of that? And then put in all the actions to make all of those beliefs align, because you actually do believe that people really matter. You've got to meet with them first. You're not just going to book a guest because, they wrote a great book. And that says a lot about what you believe in. I can't tell you how rare that is, and it's why you see the success you do.
It's kind of like what we opened the episode with, is that this is what, not just what makes people buy, but it's what makes people want to buy from you, is your story and what people identify with. When Leah and I were first creating content for our business, we were still learning from other people about how to build a business and the strategies that we were using to generate leads and put together funnels and do webinars and all that stuff. We were still learning from other people. And so when we were creating content around those things about, okay, here's a script that we use for Facebook Messenger, here's a script that we use for handling this objection or whatever it is, we were basically taking the stuff that we were learning from people who are much more skilled and much more successful than us, but we were just kind of putting our own spin on it. And we were saying, hey, this is what we learned, this is what we did, and here's how it worked out. And we were successful with that, even though we were teaching basically the same thing. But because we had that story, people wanted to learn it from us rather than from the big guru, because people wanted to see someone who they identified with, who they felt was like them, but maybe just 1 or 2 steps ahead. For example, Russell Brunson's perfect webinar script. Everybody uses it. Everybody's kind of like teaching their own version of it. But the reason why people want to learn it from us rather than Russell Brunson is because they've seen that we've done it in a way that it works for us. And people see that, oh, Todd and Leah are kind of like us. They've got young kids at home. They're building a business from home. They're doing these things. They've got this to work. I want to learn how they got it to work. I don't want to learn how Russell Brunson got it to work, who's got this whole team of people and copywriters working for him and all these other things. I want to learn how Todd and Leah did it because they're like me.
100%. You said a couple of things that really resonated so well. So number one, my first job was in private school, and I had a principal there he was brilliant. He and I, back in the 1980s, just to date myself here, came up with the concept of redesigning keyboards so that there were no physical keys, but they were all basically LED and they can change by font or by language. So if you think about it, we were trying to patent it. We just obviously were young. We didn't have the money for it. Every iPhone would have been infringing on our patents so many years ago. But he told me the most brilliant line. He said, a teacher only needs to be one day ahead of their students. And I'd rather walk in your footsteps and understand where you're at, right? And this is what holds a lot of people back as well, because they feel like they're imposters because they're not such an expert. You know, when we first started in this industry, there was nobody doing A/B tests. There was nobody doing conversion optimization. There wasn't really even a lot of people just doing the kinds of, now UX tweaks and copy tweaks that we were doing. We pioneered a lot of it. It's what eventually, helped us become New York Times bestselling author when Seth Godin decided to call the cover of our book God Awful in a blog post. He did. But yet he said, drop everything and buy that book. And again, it wasn't like we were gurus. We were just pioneering and taking our steps and trying to teach what we were learning with our clients and with what we were doing with our own sites to other people so that they can take those things. And it wasn't that we had years of experience when we started the industry. We just had a North Star. We knew where we wanted to go. We knew that we could share that information and help people transform their businesses. And I see you guys doing the exact same thing. And you guys are real and genuine, and it matters. And you're not sprinkling storytelling techniques for the sake of storytelling, which is my biggest pet peeve today, because everybody thinks storytelling is a magic formula because they think if they just turn whatever they do into a story, all of a sudden it works. No, it's real stories. It's that authenticity of being really you. It's like another guy I work with. He's a physical therapist. He has a coaching program for baseball players. And when I first met him on Twitter, he had almost nobody following him. And I looked at what he was doing. I'm like, okay, no, this guy's onto something. And I had him help rename his program. So Dr. Ishmael Gallo, who nobody cared about, all of a sudden started doing baseball flows. And we started coming up with the way he did his content, where he would show these young athletes, his kids initially even, just how they moved, and then look at the way the player moves on the professional baseball field. And we're like, most training is taking that out from people. And this is a guy who dropped out of high school, eventually went to junior college, got himself drafted by the Dodgers, okay? Wasn't athletic enough to get to the big leagues, even though he still batted 300, which is still significant. So he knew there was more. And then he used that money to become a doctor. And then he started looking at it and said, look, again, where there's friction, there's opportunity. He says, how come all these kids who are coming into my clinic move worse than my kids? And he said, well, what if I could train them back on this DNS, is what it's called, dynamic neuromuscular stabilization. If I can teach that and create a whole new training protocol about how to train people. And he's built a business way more than he earned as a physical therapist just by doing that, because we told this baseball flow story and people started seeing the flow. And I told him back then, two very important pieces that a lot of people miss. One, he who controls the vocabulary controls the industry. So when you can start putting out words that nobody's quite seen together yet, and they start associating with you, you start owning that industry, okay? And then just start telling more of his story. He started talking about, his struggles as a baseball player and where he came from. He wasn't very successful, so he keeps his program very affordable. And he does that because he believes everybody deserves that chance to get their raw natural ability out of them. Again, just being authentic, and you can see his success online because of it.
And I think you're touching on something there that's really important about telling something or saying something that people haven't heard yet before. And it's something that we harp on all the time with our clients, is that if you go on a podcast or you do a webinar, you do a challenge, you're putting content out there, and all you're doing is you're saying the same thing that everybody else is saying and the same way that they're saying it, and people have heard it all before. People may agree with you and they may like the content. They're nodding their head yes, but you're not going to move anybody into action with that.
Correct. It's funny because I got beat up a lot on the title of my new book, okay? And I've written now 11 books. And our most famous book was a book called waiting for your cat to bark. Okay. It was written up in the Wall Street Journal. It was at, #1 Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Business Week, Amazon, bestseller in all the categories. And it's almost 20 years now, and people still remember the title in the book. And when I came up with the title for I Think I Swallowed an Elephant, people were beating me up over it. And I was like, okay, you know what? No ego anymore. Like, I'm happy to explore new titles. And we went looking, and like every variation sounded just like everything that everybody else says, right? We went with subtitle that's more familiar. So the stories we sell, the success we build. Okay. But you know what? The elephant is what you're going to remember, that feeling of the elephant. And so even when I'm on stage now, I bring an elephant with me. Okay. When I finish speaking with people, I have a little micro elephant I pass out to people because I want them to realize, hey, anything overwhelming, you can swallow the elephant. I don't recommend it around kids, obviously. A little safety precaution, right? But that concept of the elephant book, as people are already starting to call it, that's going to stick because in those words alone, I think I swallowed an elephant. You have a story in your head about what that means, okay? The first time you heard it. And that's what's powerful. Not just to force what you think on people, but also give them the space to attach their own story to yours. Because when you can merge those story worlds, that's where real persuasion ends up happening. Because that's where the connection happens.
Well, and the other part of that is because a lot of what we teach is creating your unique method. You've got to take what you do and you've got to find a way or some sort of angle where the message is unique. And for a lot of people, that can be very difficult to do. So if you were a health coach and you help people to lose weight with a ketogenic diet, well, tons of people are doing that. I mean, maybe you could add intermittent fasting to that. Well, a lot of people are doing that too. There's ways you could put little alterations on it. But at some point, people are going to think that, okay, well, I already know what keto is. I already know what intermittent fasting is. And if you're just doing a different intermittent fasting schedule, I can figure that out. I don't need a coach. Well, when you're having trouble creating that unique method for your offer, sometimes the thing that's really going to make you stand out is not necessarily that, but it's your story. Because people are going to identify with the story. One of the analogies we use all the time is there's like the big realtor in town that has all the billboards and who has the best marketing, and they got realtors working underneath them. They've got the big team and everybody knows their name. And then you've got people who are like doing this part-time and they don't really have a ton of experience. Maybe they've got a job that they're working on the side as well to bring in the income. Think about it this way. If somebody is looking for a realtor and their brother-in-law is now that guy who is doing this part-time, who really doesn't know what they're doing, but they've got the relationship. That's what's hard to compete with, is the relationship, that they identify with that person, that they know them, that they know, like, and trust them. And probably 99 times out of 100, they're going to go and they're going to hire the brother-in-law who really doesn't know what he's doing over the person who's got all the branding and the team and the success, stories and everything else because of the relationship.
It's funny you brought up that as an example because on my podcast today, I recorded a friend of mine, Batcha Porter, who's a real estate agent here in the Round Rock, Texas area. And I've just been encouraging her to lean into her personal story. Now, she's unique to begin with because I don't know, where you live, but here in Texas, for realtors, there's over 20,000 realtors, and once you get your realtor license, most people stop, right? But there's 20 certifications that you can get to learn more about different, working with veterans, seniors, property tax assessment. She's taken 11 and she's about to finish her 12th certification. Okay. But it isn't just that, right? That's a fact and that's okay. So she knows more. Great. But that's not what gets her the business. The business is when we're able to get her to talk about why she's so diligent about knowing so much. And you find out that her mom lost her house in foreclosure when she was 8, 9 years old. Okay. Because of something she didn't know. And that was one of her first certifications, is short sale foreclosure. Okay. And then you start hearing her tell the stories of the crises that she saved her clients from. And she saved my wife and I's business a whole big mess because of how diligent she is. We almost leased an office for our home care agency that we own as well, with an AC unit that was full of mold, because at the last minute, the landlord decided to put in, we'd be responsible for the full replacement of the AC if it goes bad while we're there. We're like, huh? And she caught that little line just hidden inside the lease. And you want that realtor who'll be able to stand up for and find all those little details because most of them aren't. But it's those stories, or the person who bought a home from someone who was 65 and over and had a homestead exemption, which reduced the tax rate. And then they went in and the tax rate was higher and they didn't realize, but she would know that. She'd do that homework for you. And so she's starting to tell those stories. And of course, people are flocking to her because she's real. She's authentic. She wants to connect with you. And she wants to make sure you buy the best with her because you're the most intelligent person in the room because she's done all her homework for you. Yeah, realtors are a great example. Another one are tech founders. I find this a lot. I was with another friend of mine who's a few years older than me, just got fired from his job, trying to figure out what he's doing. And he comes to me and wants to sit in a coffee shop and wants to discuss his new business. And he's going to be doing, ready for this one, Todd? Sit down now. Organic AI content cascade. You ready to buy? I was like, Fernando, what is that? Like, I get it. Like, I get the series of words together, right? This is what chat is great at doing, putting a bunch of words together. I said, what are you talking about? And as he started talking to me about how he takes founders of businesses and helps them create their content, I was like, okay. What you do is the viral genius framework. And I created a logo for him, even on the spot, called Rated VG, kind of like Rated PG. Okay. And you take the zone of genius of these founders and you package their content so that it has that ability to be viral. Oh, yeah. And all of a sudden, he started doing that. He started getting speaking gigs. He started getting clients. He's pretty much completely booked up right now. He's got a great podcast. His last episodes are not be missed either. But it's just in those simple words. By the way, the rated VG, the VG also symbolically shows very good for us, right? It's those layers of stories that chat can never do, AI will never do, that we have contextual associations with, either because of stories we have in our own brains from being very young, right, that have been implanted us, that now we sandwiched into his brand and his story, that once he tells people, he's signing them up left and right because of that clarity of that story and telling it in a much better way, in a simpler way, but an impactful way. Because those words, even though you've known them before, they have a context with the logo, with the story, with everything.
Well, and it comes back to that theme again. That, like, the story is what makes it unique. I love the one about the realtor with the foreclosure certification. Like, the story about having, her was it her grandmother that went through the foreclosure?
Her mom, and she had to end up living with her grandmother because of it.
Well, and now that makes her experience unique. And when you compare that to, okay, here's all these people with the foreclosure certification. I'm going through foreclosure. Who do I want to do business with? Oh, this person has actually experienced this. This person knows what it's like. They know what I'm going through. Okay, this is a person I want to do business with.
That vulnerable side that allows you to connect with the human. We're coming full circle. That's really it, right? Like, I know you guys are not perfect digital entrepreneurs. There's no such thing, right? I know you've made tons of mistakes. You're still trying to find things to improve certain things. And it's that passion to keep wanting to find new ways to improve. That's what helped businesses like Amazon. You could always be better today than you were yesterday. That's humanity. We're either growing or we're stalling and dying. And so we get that choice.
Now, you've got a freebie for our audience, don't you?
I do. So I wanted to give something like really actionable for people so they can leverage some of the techniques real quickly. So they don't have to worry about the book yet. That's a little bit more to chew than the freebie. But I've got what I call the elephant's toolbox. So it's a series of about 20 different tools that they can use to rethink how they're working with their story and make it more impactful. And they can just grab that for free right on our website.
Perfect. Yes, and we will have the link for that in the show notes. So be sure to check that out. And like I said, the story is so important because when we think about a story, yes, you have a big overarching story, but there's also smaller stories that you tell that people resonate with. These experiences that you've had throughout your life, in your business, working with clients. And you need to learn how to tell the smaller stories as well as your big ones. And that's really what makes people want to buy from you rather than somebody else, are those stories. So it's so super important. I encourage anybody to definitely check that out. If people want to find you online, connect with you, and learn more about what you do, where can they find you?
Well, I'm going to give the first one. If they really want to connect with human intelligence, no pun intended, I'm actually the Grok on Twitter before it was ever called Grok. That was a nickname given to me by my clients ages ago. But yeah, if you Google me, You will find me everywhere, whether it's Facebook, LinkedIn, my website, bryaneisenberg.com. I'm everywhere. I'm on TikTok. There's nowhere I'm not going to be because obviously my customers are everywhere. So I just try to plug in wherever I can be.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, we will have the link for your website and some of your socials in the show notes as well. Bryan, thank you so much. This has been an excellent conversation. We're really glad that you decided to hop on the show and talk with us today.
Well, I want to add a bonus if we can.
Oh, yeah. Let's do that.
Let's add a bonus. So I'm waiting for the actual copies because until like yesterday, all I had is these proof copies with a little gray line on them. They're terrible. But now that I have like real copies and more coming, come up with a fun little challenge and let's send out 3 copies to people in your audience. Signed copies.
Okay. How about the first 3 people that give us a review and mention this episode in the review? It is preferably a 5-star review.
It'd be authentic. It's okay. I can handle it.
An authentic 5-star review. We'll get the bucks.
And there may be some other surprises in there. You never know.
All right. Sounds good. Bryan, thank you so much. We really appreciate having you here today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Todd.
You've been listening to the Digital Trailblazer podcast. For show notes and information about today's guest, head to digitaltrailblazer.com. Now, if you love this episode, if you got some value, make sure you leave us a review and subscribe. And be sure to share this episode with anyone you know who could use help to build their business. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.